My drunk wife admitted she didn't want me, so I vanished without a trace. Evan sat quietly in the corner of the bustling party, nursing a drink that had long since gone warm. The laughter around him was a stark contrast to the quiet turbulence brewing within. He glanced over at Lila, his wife, who was the center of attention, her laughter captivating the room as she easily navigated conversations with friends and acquaintances. 8 years together, 5 of them married, and this was what Evan had envisioned when he first fell for her, an intelligent, beautiful woman who seemed to embody everything he lacked. However, as the night progressed, an unsettling feeling crept into Evan's heart. Lila's increasing consumption of alcohol transformed her lively spirit into a sharp tongue. He watched, futilely hoping the evening would turn out as blissful as all those years ago. The dark cloud of dread loomed nearer, waiting to unveil its destructive storm. He should have known that the tension weaving its way through the air was a prelude to the inevitable disruption. As he tightened his grip on the glass, a sense of disbelief settled in his gut, drowning out the music that had once buoyed his heart. Evan's mind wandered, recalling warm summer nights spent wrapped in each other's arms, the delicate intimacy of whispered dreams under starlit skies. They had once filled the spaces between them effortlessly. It felt impossible that such joy could dissolve like mist in the morning sun. But now, the air thrummed with an electric charge, as if all present were blissfully unaware of the fault line lurking beneath the surface of the celebration. Lila was just a few feet away, hair cascading like a waterfall of dark chocolate, catching the light around her. She spun, lost in the thrill of social exchanges, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering in Evan's soul. Her laughter rang clear, dazzling everyone in its reach, but for him, it was a haunting melody, a reminder of all the connection they once shared now teetering on the edge of the precipice. "Having fun, Evan?" A friend of theirs, Jenna, called out as she sidled up beside him, her vibrant smile tethered to the conditions of the night. Evan offered a tight smile of his own, but her eyes flicked over to Lila, who was animatedly gesturing to her companions, and a twinge of sympathy crossed her face. "You don't look so good. Is everything all right?" He nodded, forcing down the knot that threatened to tighten his throat. "It's just been a long week," he replied, but the words felt inadequate, insubstantial against the weight of what was rapidly unspooling before him. "Yeah, I get that. Lila's been really social tonight," she remarked lightly, not catching the brewing hurricane of tension that soon erupted. "I can tell she's excited." Excited? That word pierced through his defenses. It echoed against the walls of his heart, mocking him because excitement had become a foreign concept in their partnership. He wanted to embrace her joy, but found himself tethered to an unseen darkness, a gnawing fear that bubbled just beneath the surface. The party progressed, joyful chaos engulfing him while he felt more like a ghost lingering at the edges, shackled by unease and unspoken questions. Lila's energy was infectious. It brightened the atmosphere. Yet, Evan could feel the impending shift, like a tightly wound spring waiting for the slightest touch to break free. He blinked, lost in thought, only to catch Lila's eye as she stumbled toward him, a cheeky grin plastered across her face. "Hey, boring," she slurred slightly, her eyes glazed over, glinting with liquor-induced air. "You need to lighten up. We're celebrating." Her words, though playful, unraveled the last threads of his attempt to remain unaffected. The sharp edge of reality cut deep, igniting that well of emotion he'd fought so hard to suppress. He opened his mouth, alive with desire to respond, to breach the chasm that had developed between them over the years, but what emerged was lifeless. "I guess," he said, forcing a smile that crumbled at the edges. Lila raised an eyebrow, a curious light igniting her features as if contemplating his somberness. "You really need to embrace life. God, it can be so short. Just watch me." She twirled then, her laughter ringing out, melding effortlessly with the chatter, oblivious to the silence that had replaced Evan's heart. Another shot of whiskey went down too quickly. Another laugh echoed, louder than the last, and without warning, Evan felt the crescendo of discontent erupt. Whispers trickled among the guests like a fashionable breeze, excitement blissfully hiding the truth. "How are you doing, Evan?" The question drifted in from yet another familiar face, and he accidentally met Lila's gaze just as she laughed at something Edgar said, a man who had always seemed a bit too interested in her spark. Suddenly, jealousy roared in his chest, a beast he'd often ignored. The night felt surreal, decorative whims and laughter surrounding him, while emotional chaos tore him apart from the inside. And when Lila stumbled, straying dangerously close to Edgar, it felt like a cinematic nightmare he couldn't stop. "Evan," Lila called, her voice loud enough to draw attention, and Evan's heart dropped. There it was, the undeniable crumbling of trust. You should have seen how fun this guy is. We should all hang out more, right? The mocking glances, the way she wrapped her arms around Edgar's shoulder as if he were a perfect fit, all clawed at Evan from the inside, merging the feelings of a fish trapped in a net, both helpless and aware. A slow burn of betrayal coursed through him as he felt like a marionette with its strings cut, unable to rein in the charade any longer. Shadows danced around them, a world completely unaware of the despair simmering beneath the surface. Then it happened. In a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Lila's voice, imbued with the liquid courage of the evening, declared loudly, I shouldn't have kissed him. The clamor around them shifted, an uncomfortable laughter replaced by sudden tension. Evan felt as if the floor had buckled beneath him, leaving him hanging in midair, suspended between disbelief and the crushing weight of those words. Silence draped over the party like a heavy blanket, and all eyes turned toward him, waiting, judging, dissecting. In that instant, the reality of Lila's betrayal pierced his heart, and he knew intuitively that the time for silence was over. Evan's pulse quickened. The room had become stifling, the air thickened with judgment and curiosity. Lila's voice echoed against the walls, laced with an intoxicating blend of lucidity and vulnerability. All he could do was stand there, a mere spectator to his own heartache, as laughter faded into muffled whispers, heavy with disbelief. He felt trapped in a glass box, the layers of shame and heartbreak pressing against him from all sides, forcing him to confront the gravity of her declaration. The world around him blurred as he sought to gather his thoughts, desperately trying to parse out the depth of what Lila had just admitted. Every moment he had cherished, every dream they had spun together over the years, now felt like shattered fragments scattered across a floor where he couldn't pick them up. The laughter he had once adored now rang hollow and cruel. Evan. Lila's voice slipped into a husky plea, pulling him from the fog of realization. She leaned closer, her breath heavy with whiskey and honesty, her eyes searching his as if the warmth between them still flickered. For a fleeting moment, he almost recoiled from her touch, yet he hesitated, caught between the sheer pain and a faint echo of love for the woman he had pledged his life to. In that unbearable heartbeat, memories flooded through him. The playfulness between them, the long conversations that spun into dawn, the comfort of mundane routines, were they now nothing but distant recollections? Everything felt paradoxical, as if she still stood before him as the woman he adored while simultaneously exposing a bruised, raw wound that may never heal. What did you say? It felt absurd saying the words out loud, as if voicing them would somehow ground them in reality, a reality he desperately fought to avoid. The strum of his heart echoed across the room, an attempt to give weight to the disbelief hanging around him. Lila's confidence, fueled by the night's drinks, began to waver. I didn't mean it like that, she stammered, but Evan could hear the tremor beneath her bravado. It was just some fun, just a mistake. A mistake? The word morphed in his mind, twisting like a knife. Did that small label encapsulate the intimacy she shared with someone else? Anger bubbled just beneath the surface, a molten pool of hurt and betrayal threatening to spill over. A mistake, he repeated, his voice a low growl. Is that what this is to you? The bystanders lingered near, whispering their own twisted interpretations of their unraveling marriage. Evan could almost feel their eyes like daggers stabbing into the moment, sharpening the conversation into a ferocious bite. You think saying it was a mistake makes this all okay? Rage surged within him, then wrestled with the deeper urges of love and compassion. He wanted to scream, to shake her awake from the stupor of denial, but deep down he feared the truth. To confront oneself could lead to unbearable vulnerability. Evan, please. Lila's voice softened, desperation threading through her words, tightening the tension in the air. I said it in a moment of what? He cut her off, unwilling to let her excuse derail the gravity of her admission. A moment of clarity, a moment when you realized you didn't want to be with me anymore. It came out sharper than he'd intended, but it was a wound that needed to be laid bare. How could he respond to this, to her, when his heart felt like an anchor pulling under the pressure of uncertainty? She flinched as if struck, her expression wavering between guilt and defiance, leaving him acutely aware of her trembling facade. Evan, she whispered, and for a brief moment, vulnerability flickered across her features. The laughter in the room seemed a million miles away. The soft music faded like background noise, consumed by this new, raging tempest between them. Evan locked eyes with her, searching for the Lila he had known all these years, a woman who danced in the rain and laughed until dawn. But there was an emptiness there, like a veil had been drawn against the warmth of their love. He was racing against time, against doubt, against a betrayal that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. "I can't do this right now," he uttered finally, his voice barely above a whisper. The confession sliced through the stillness, delicately threading itself between the vibrant, frolicking crowd. He turned, feeling an insatiable need to escape the weight of her truth, of their truth. The layers of betrayal, love, anger, and confusion wove intricate knots within his heart, each strand tugging at him in different directions. Just as Evan stepped past a cluster of concerned friends, he felt Lila's hand clasp around his wrist. He paused, the fire from her touch coursing through him, a reminder that they were still tethered, for better or worse, living under the same uncertain sky. "Don't walk away from me," she urged, her eyes welling with unshed tears. "I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to feel alive again." The words stung, the irony flooding through him. He had spent years trying to be the stability she craved, yet here they were, her wandering heart searching elsewhere for the thrill that he had yearned to provide. But a light ignited within him then, brushing against the darkness, sparking something unfamiliar, a recognition that his pain could not be a suffocating veil. Beneath everything, turmoil still coiled within him, pooling just below the surface, rather than dragging him down. "I need to think," he said, breaking her grip with a gentle resolve. The freedom of stepping away was a bittersweet victory, but he knew it was necessary. As he walked away from the party, toward the cool night outside, Evan could feel the weight of their unraveling resting firmly on his shoulders, a continuous reminder that decisions made in shadows cast long, unyielding trails. With every step, he released a piece of the pain and anger, fumbling through the emergence of a truth too raw to ignore. There, in the bitter chill of the night, he let go just enough to breathe, unsure what lay ahead but resolved not to remain shackled to a love that felt more like a wound than a haven. Evan stepped into the chill of the night, the sudden coldness hitting him like a slap in the face, making him acutely aware of how warm and stifling the party had become. The world out here felt vast and lonely, and each step he took only deepened that sense of isolation. He walked with purpose, his mind racing in circles, thoughts colliding like storm clouds gathering above a tumultuous sea. The laughter from within faded into a haunting echo as he moved further into the dark, each fading sound puncturing the air with memories, sweet, bitter, and cruel. He leaned against the rough brick wall of a nearby building, the coolness of the surface seeping through the back of his shirt, grounding him momentarily. The juxtaposition between the warmth inside, of laughter, of fleeting joy, and the cold solitude of his reality was an unbearable juxtaposition. Out here, it was just him and the weight of her betrayal, pressing heavily against his chest like a boulder he was too weary to remove. How had he not seen it coming? Lila's spark that had always ignited their evenings had dimmed over time, but he had chosen to ignore it, burying his concerns beneath the weight of optimism. She had attracted attention like a moth to a flame, spinning vibrant tales and dazzling stories, drawing others to her light while he remained in the background, content with the steady rhythm of their life together. Evan felt unfurling swells of regret cycle through him. Just a mistake. The words replayed incessantly in his mind, stirring a pot of emotions that threatened to boil over. Mistake? It felt as if she wielded the term like a weapon, something to minimize the vast emotional destruction left in the wake of her indiscretion. Hurt morphed into indignant fury as he recalled the way she had leaned into him that night, confident and enchanting, a vision of everything he had fallen in love with all those years ago. But who was she really? The woman who tangled with fleeting desire and whispered promises to a stranger, or the steadfast partner he had imagined, planted resolutely at his side? Evan inhaled sharply, the breath catching in his throat. The air was stale, stagnant, as stale as the promises unspoken and words left unsaid swirling in his mind. He felt like a fool for believing that their love could withstand a storm he had gravely underestimated. What about the flicker of pain in her eyes when he walked away? That fleeting glimpse of regret and sorrow? His own heart hardened with every passing thought, the bile of resentment churning violently within him. Unable to keep still, he began walking again, his path illuminated by the nearby streetlights that flickered testimony to the night's fading vibrance. With each footfall, another piece of heartbreak detached itself, his anguish morphing into questions. Where had things gone so wrong? Had it been a singular moment, her reckless kiss in a drunken haze, or a slow, twisting unraveling that neither of them had been brave enough to confront? What had he done to become so easily replaceable? He wasn't stupid, he saw the signs, but it had been easier to ignore the whispers of doubt than to confront them head-on. He recalled their last road trip, the exhilarating freedom of open roads, the laughter shared beneath starlit skies. They had promised to cherish one another, to keep their love thriving even when life threatened to drown them in its mundane repetitiveness. He had poured so much of himself into that promise, cultivating the foundations of a life he thought they both wanted. But tonight, Lila's truth played like a cruel betrayal, unraveling each stitch of commitment. With his thoughts a tempest, he found himself on an empty park bench at the edge of a tranquil pond. The still water reflected the half-moon above, distorted by gentle ripples as if the world were echoing his inner turmoil. He sighed heavily, watching the reflection shatter with every movement, mirroring the fracture within him. Lila, he murmured her name as if saying it out loud could give him clarity. He felt her there beside him, yet she was miles away, lost in her own reckoning. Had she truly wanted to feel alive again, or had she just chased the thrill that she believed had been snuffed out by the weight of their routine? Time slipped through his fingers like sand as he wrestled with the turmoil that churned within. He didn't just feel betrayed, he felt betrayed by himself for not seeing through the mask of indifference. As he sat there, the wind caught strands of his hair and whispered desires of reconciliation and understanding. What if they could address these ruptured seams together? But a flicker of caution silenced that notion. Bravery was not just about confronting Lila. It was also about confronting his own heartbroken self. He needed to understand what his love had morphed into, to sift through rubble not only for himself but for the future he had dreamed of with her still nestled in his heart. As he stared into the rippling waters, he felt the tightly woven threads of love and resentment still tangled within him, messy, chaotic, but undeniably present. With each brush of cool wind against his face, a single thought emerged, crystallizing in the growing darkness. First, he needed to address his own wounds before he could ever consider the contours of their shared pain. Driven by the acceptance of that very truth, Evan rose from the bench, his heart and mind slowly making their way toward a painful reckoning he could no longer afford to avoid. The path before him lay strewn with uncertainty, yet it beckoned with a haunting promise. Sudden freedom awaited, just as darkness could cradle opportunity with open arms. He began walking back toward the light, the vibrant energy of life waiting at the masquerade where he had lost himself, half-heartedly ready to face what awaited him in both the shadows and the light. Evan stepped into the chill of the night, the sudden coldness hitting him like a slap in the face, making him acutely aware of how warm and stifling the party had become. The world out here felt vast and lonely, and each step he took only deepened that sense of isolation. He walked with purpose, his mind racing in circles, thoughts colliding like storm clouds gathering above a tumultuous sea. The laughter from within faded into a haunting echo as he moved further into the dark, each fading sound puncturing the air with memories, sweet, bitter, and cruel. He leaned against the rough brick wall of a nearby building, the coolness of the surface seeping through the back of his shirt, grounding him momentarily. The juxtaposition between the warmth inside, of laughter, fleeting joy, and the cold solitude of his reality was an unbearable dichotomy. Out here, it was just him and the weight of her betrayal, pressing heavily against his chest like a boulder he was too weary to remove. How had he not seen it coming? Lila's spark that had always ignited their evenings had dimmed over time, but he had chosen to ignore it, burying his concerns beneath the weight of hope. She had attracted attention like a moth to a flame, spinning vibrant tales and dazzling stories, effortlessly drawing others to her light while he remained in the background, content with the steady rhythm of their life together. Evan felt unfurling swells of regret crash through him. Just a mistake. The words replayed incessantly in his mind, stirring a pot of emotions that threatened to boil over. Mistake? It felt as if she wielded the term like a weapon, something to minimize the vast emotional destruction left in the wake of her indiscretion. Hurt morphed into indignant fury as he recalled the way she had leaned into him that night, confident and enchanting, a vision of everything he had fallen in love with all those years ago. But who was she really? The woman who tangled with fleeting desire and whispered promises to a stranger, or the steadfast partner he had imagined, firmly at his side? Evan inhaled sharply, the breath catching in his throat. The air was stale, stagnant, just like the promises unspoken and words left unsaid swirling in his mind. He felt like a fool for believing that their love could withstand a storm he had gravely underestimated. What about the flicker of pain in her eyes when he walked away? That fleeting glimpse of regret and sorrow? His heart hardened with every passing thought, the bile of resentment churning violently within him. Unable to keep still, he began walking again, his path illuminated by the nearby streetlights that flickered testimony to the night's fading vibrance. With each footfall, another piece of heartbreak detached itself, his anguish transforming into questions. Where had things gone so wrong? Had it been a singular moment, her reckless kiss in a drunken haze, or a slow, twisting unraveling that neither of them had been brave enough to confront? What had he done to become so easily replaceable? He wasn't stupid, he saw the signs, but it had been easier to ignore the whispers of doubt than to face them head-on. He recalled their last road trip, the exhilarating freedom of open roads, laughter shared beneath starlit skies. They had promised to cherish one another, to keep their love thriving even when life threatened to drown them in its mundane repetitiveness. He had poured so much of himself into that promise, cultivating the foundations of a life he thought they both wanted. But tonight, Lila's truth played like a cruel betrayal, unraveling each stitch of commitment. With his thoughts a tempest, he found himself on an empty park bench at the edge of a tranquil pond. The still water reflected the half-moon above, distorted by gentle ripples, as if the world were echoing his inner turmoil. He sighed heavily, watching the reflection shatter with every movement, mirroring the fracture within him. Lila, he murmured, her name escaping like a wish into the cool night air. He felt her there beside him, yet she was miles away, lost in her own reckoning. Had she truly wanted to feel alive again, or had she just chased the thrill she believed had been snuffed out by the weight of their routine? Time slipped through his fingers like sand as he wrestled with the turmoil that churned within. He didn't just feel betrayed, he felt betrayed by himself for not addressing the cracks that had long started to show. How could he have let her drift so far away? What was it about their life that had become suffocating to her? The cool breeze carried the scent of dew-kissed grass and blooming jasmines, but all he felt was a void, an echo of memories embellished with the heady perfume of first love. He could still see her face light up at the mention of their shared dreams, the fervor in her eyes ignited like fireworks bursting against a night sky. But with that memory came the pain of knowing that the spark Lila ignited had carried her towards someone else. He felt hollow and unsure while tracing the outline of the heart he thought they had shared, a heart that felt more like rubble scattered around him. Evan's chest tightened, swallowing the emotions rising there. The wind tousled his hair as if teasing him for clinging to the past instead of facing the reality of the present. He felt her laughter reverberate through him, the warmth of their shared moments heating his veins. Yet the flicker of betrayal extinguished that warmth, plunging him back into the icy waters of his own discontent. His fists clenched at his sides, the storm of anger swelling within him like a tidal wave. Had her kisses at night, the secrets they shared, crumbled under the pressure of her desire to feel something? Who should he blame? Himself for not doing enough to keep her living in their shared world, or Lila for steering her ship away from the harbor of their love. The cacophony of emotions buzzed like angry hornets, stinging with bitterness, yet laced with sorrow. Still, a flicker of caution silenced the tempest. Bravery was not just about confronting Lila. It was also about confronting himself, his insecurities, his failures, the heartache that twisted his perspective. He needed to understand what his love had morphed into, to sift through the rubble not only for himself but for the future he had dreamed of with her still nestled in his heart. As he stared into the rippling waters, clarity began to emerge amidst the chaos. He felt the tightly woven threads of love and resentment still tangled within him, messy, chaotic, but undeniably present. With each brush of cool wind against his face, a single thought emerged, crystallizing in the growing darkness. First, he needed to address his own wounds before he could consider the contours of their shared pain. Driven by the acceptance of that very truth, Evan rose from the bench, his heart and mind slowly making their way toward a painful reckoning he could no longer afford to avoid. The path before him lay strewn with uncertainty, yet it beckoned with a haunting promise. Sudden freedom awaited, just as darkness could cradle opportunity with open arms. As he turned his back to the flickering lights of the party, he emerged into the night, ready to face the echoes of his choices and perhaps, just perhaps, a journey towards understanding himself anew. Evan stepped into the chill of the night, the sudden coldness hitting him like a slap in the face, making him acutely aware of how warm and stifling the party had become. The world out here felt vast and lonely, and each step he took only deepened that sense of isolation. He walked with purpose, his mind racing in circles, thoughts colliding like storm clouds gathering above a tumultuous sea. The laughter from within faded into a haunting echo as he moved further into the dark, each fading sound puncturing the air with memories, sweet, bitter, and cruel. He leaned against the rough brick wall of a nearby building, the coolness of the surface seeping through the back of his shirt, grounding him momentarily. The juxtaposition between the warmth inside, of laughter, fleeting joy, and the cold solitude of his reality was an unbearable dichotomy. Out here, it was just him and the weight of her betrayal, pressing heavily against his chest like a boulder he was too weary to remove. How had he not seen it coming? Lila's spark, which made her so intoxicating and enchanting, had dimmed. As the evening unfolded, he found himself teetering on the edge of realization, his trust unspooling thread by thread. She had always attracted attention like a moth to a flame, effortlessly drawing others into her orbit while he faded into the background, playing the role of stability of a rock. He felt unfurling swells of regret crash through him. Just a mistake. The words replayed incessantly in his mind, stirring a pot of emotions that threatened to boil over. Mistake? It felt as if she wielded the term like a weapon, something to minimize the vast emotional destruction left in the wake of her indiscretion. Hurt morphed into indignant fury as he recalled the way she had leaned into him that night, confident and enchanting, a vision of everything he had fallen in love with all those years ago. But who was she really? The woman who tangled with fleeting desire and whispered promises to a stranger, or the steadfast partner he had imagined, firmly at his side? He inhaled sharply, the breath catching in his throat. The air was stale, stagnant, just like the promises unspoken and words left unsaid swirling in his mind. He felt like a fool for believing that their love could withstand a storm he had gravely underestimated. What about the flicker of pain in her eyes when he walked away? That fleeting glimpse of regret and sorrow? His heart hardened with every passing thought, the bile of resentment churning violently within him. Unable to keep still, he began walking again, his path illuminated by the nearby streetlights that flickered testimony to the night's fading vibrance. With each footfall, another piece of heartbreak detached itself, his anguish transforming into questions. Where had things gone so wrong? Had it been a singular moment, her reckless kiss in a drunken haze, or a slow, twisting unraveling that neither of them had been brave enough to confront? What had he done to become so easily replaceable? He wasn't stupid, he saw the signs, but it had been easier to ignore the whispers of doubt than to face them head-on. He recalled their last road trip, the exhilarating freedom of open roads, laughter shared beneath starlit skies. They had promised to cherish one another, to keep their love thriving even when life threatened to drown them in its mundane repetitiveness. He had poured so much of himself into that promise, cultivating the foundations of a life he thought they both wanted. But tonight, Lila's truth played like a cruel betrayal, unraveling each stitch of commitment. With his thoughts a tempest, he found himself on an empty park bench at the edge of a tranquil pond. The still water reflected the half-moon above, distorted by gentle ripples as if the world were echoing his inner turmoil. He sighed heavily, watching the reflection shatter with every movement, mirroring the fracture within him. Lila, he murmured, her name escaping like a wish into the cool night air. He felt her presence beside him, yet she was miles away, lost in her own reckoning. Had she truly wanted to feel alive again, or had she just chased the thrill she believed had been snuffed out by the weight of their routine? Time slipped through his fingers like sand as he wrestled with the turmoil that churned within. He didn't just feel betrayed, he felt betrayed by himself for not addressing the cracks that had long started to show. How could he have let her drift so far away? What was it about their life that had become suffocating to her? The cool breeze carried the scent of dew-kissed grass and blooming jasmines, but all he felt was a void, an echo of memories embellished with the heady perfume of first love. He could still see her face light up at the mention of their shared dreams, the fervor in her eyes ignited like fireworks bursting against a night sky. But with that memory came the pain of knowing that the spark Lila ignited had carried her towards someone else. He felt hollow and unsure while tracing the outline of the heart he thought they had shared, a heart that felt more like rubble scattered around him. Evan's chest tightened, swallowing the emotions rising there. The wind tousled his hair as if teasing him for clinging to the past instead of facing the reality of the present. He felt her laughter reverberate through him, the warmth of their shared moments heating his veins. Yet the flicker of betrayal extinguished that warmth, plunging him back into the icy waters of his own discontent. His fists clenched at his sides, the storm of anger swelling within him like a tidal wave. Had her kisses at night, the secrets they shared, crumbled under the pressure of her desire to feel something? Who should he blame? Himself for not doing enough to keep her living in their shared world, or Lila for steering her ship away from the harbor of their love. The cacophony of emotions buzzed like angry hornets, stinging with bitterness but laced with sorrow. In that moment of self-reflection, something shifted. The furious storm within turned to a quiet thunder, and he began to hear familiar voices within, the echoes of their laughter, the soft whispers of tender moments. Each memory took on a different hue in the light of his despair. There was a time when their relationship held the promise of unbreakable bonds, when they shared sunsets that painted the sky as vibrantly as their dreams. Now those hues were tainted, muddy, struggling to emerge from the darker colors of betrayal that color his current reality. Still, a flicker of caution silenced the tempest. Bravery was not just about confronting Lila. It was also about confronting himself, his insecurities, his failures, the heartache that twisted his perspective. He needed to understand what his love had morphed into, to sift through the rubble not only for himself but for the future he had dreamed of with her still nestled in his heart. As he stared into the rippling waters, clarity began to emerge amidst the chaos. He felt the tightly woven threads of love and resentment still tangled within him, messy, chaotic, but undeniably present. With each brush of cool wind against his face, a single thought emerged, crystallizing in the growing darkness. First, he needed to address his own wounds before he could consider the contours of their shared pain. Fueled by a determination he had almost lost, Evan wiped the moisture from his eyes, drawing strength from the stillness around him. The night sky sprawled endlessly overhead, dotted with stars that once felt out of reach, yet now seemed like tiny beacons of hope for all he had yet to uncover about himself. With a heavy heart yet open spirit, he rose from the bench, feeling more grounded than he had in hours. The path before him lay strewn with uncertainty, yet it beckoned with a haunting promise. Sudden freedom awaited, just as darkness could cradle opportunity with open arms. As he turned his back to the flickering lights of the party, a weight shifted. He was determined to unearth the remnants of who he was, even if it meant traversing through the jagged edges of what had happened. Evan took a deep breath as he stepped forward into the night, ready to face the echoes of his choices and perhaps, just perhaps, a journey toward understanding himself anew. The rain began to fall, soft at first, like a tender kiss from the heavens, but soon it turned into a steady rhythm that synchronized perfectly with Evan's pounding heart. Each droplet splashed against the pavement, a reminder of how cleansing moments can be born from destruction. He walked through the downpour, letting the coolness envelope him and wash away the fervor of anger he had harbored. The pounding rain seemed to march in time with his thoughts, drowning out the cacophony of hurt while nurturing new possibilities. In the distance, the muted glow of streetlights blurred through the curtain of rain, illuminating his path ahead. Evan felt vulnerable, stripped bare of his defenses as he drifted through the streets, processing the tumult that had defined him for far too long. His thoughts circled back to Lila's words, how she had, so thoughtlessly, fractured the illusion of their perfect life. Betrayal had become an anchor, pulling him into a sea of regret. Yet now, standing alone in the storm, that anchor felt less like a burden and more like a catalyst for change. As he wandered deeper into the heart of the city, the streets glistened, mirroring his internal struggle. The soft light reflected off puddles, creating shimmering patterns that danced beneath his feet. Evan felt almost meditative, his body carried by a rhythm promised by the rain. He needed to let this evening unfold, to breathe in the scent of fresh beginnings amid scents of wet pavement and birch trees lining the sidewalk. With each step, he fought against the bitter tide that sought to drown him, pondering what drove Lila to stray. Was it truly about him? Or had she been seeking validation for her own worth, a desperate grasping for identity amid the confines of daily life? He clenched his jaw, thoughts wrestling like wild stallions racing through his mind. How had he gotten so lost in his own thoughts, so consumed by the facade of their relationship, that he had failed to notice her struggle? Evan pulled out his phone, the bright screen lighting up the darkness, casting a faint glow on his face. He could see Lila's name among the unanswered messages, texts filled with her apologies, desperate to explain herself. Each word of regret had echoed the same refrain. I don't want to lose you. They had once been woven together, intimately entwined in the universe they had created. But now her words felt like a paradox, a battle cry toward conflict rather than the soothing balm of understanding he hoped for. His heart felt heavy with the thoughts of her haphazardly rearranging the truths they once shared. Why did she believe there were only two paths? Love or betrayal? Would she never understand that one didn't negate the other? He had loved her through phases of lost dreams, through the weight of both their aspirations. So why had she sought solace in the arms of another? As his thoughts spun deeper into uncertainty, The rain poured down more heavily, the rhythmic drumming on the asphalt reflecting his internal discord. Were they really meant to be together if she could look him in the eye, proclaiming her love, yet still falter under boredom's weight? The juxtaposition fought within him. Did he even want her back? The bitterness of her betrayal hung in the air, but beneath that anger lay the timid flicker of something more profound, a longing to understand and perhaps forgive, not just her, but himself. Caught in this storm of introspection, Evan ducked into a small cafe, seeking refuge from the torrent outside. The warm, earthy scents of coffee and baked goods wrapped around him like a comforting embrace, pulling him away from the chaos of his racing thoughts. Light flickered in the dim space, illuminating cozy corners filled with weary souls sipping steaming cups. He found a lonely table near the window, the rain creating a symphony outside that nearly drowned out his thoughts as it pattered against the glass. In the cafe's embrace, he allowed himself the comfort of anonymity, observing the patrons as they engaged cheerfully despite the dreary weather. The cafe buzzed with life, laughter melting into music that danced through the space. It felt almost surreal, people clinging to joy amid the storm, not unlike a lifeline in the tempest of chaos in his life. And then, amidst his musings, something deep within him clicked. A realization unfolded with the ease of the rain's falling. Revenge would nurture nothing. The seeds of bitterness planted within him only served to harden his heart. The thought festered, dimming the light that still craved understanding and connection. Lila might have sought an escape in her reckless choices, but he was the one who needed to escape the dark forest of vengeance, the very darkness she risked falling into. Evan felt the urge to reach out to her, to break through the tangled web of misunderstandings that had ensnared them both. In that moment, the swirling fog began to clear. He understood that to heal, from betrayal, from hurt, was to confront not only his pain but also hers. Perhaps it was time to put down the stones he had prepared for her, to stop tossing them into the dark waters of regret. Instead, he needed to find a way to build something from the ashes, to find clarity and hope for a shared path forward, whether together or apart. He pulled out the napkin from a nearby dispenser, the ink pen tucked into his pocket itching for release. As he wrote, the rain softened outside, almost as if nature was yielding to his new resolve. He penned a message, his heart racing as he poured clarity onto the page, a tentative bridge arcing toward understanding and forgiveness. The words flowed gently, no harshness, just honesty. He would write to her, not to reclaim what was lost, but to understand the shared dreams they still held, the love worth navigating through storms. He signed off simply, "I want to talk," feeling the weight of that one line resonate through him like an unbinding thread. Without hesitation, Evan sent the message. The act of reaching out felt like a breath of fresh air after choking on resentment for days. The rain continued to fall, but now it felt rejuvenating, each drop a reminder that rebirth often comes after a storm. As he settled into his thoughts, a quiet resolve emerged, not just for Lila, but for himself. As much as she had faltered in her pursuit of happiness, he realized he must confront his own fears, his own invitations to vulnerability. It was time to unmask the darkness, to gently coax light back into the spaces between betrayal and love. In a world where everything felt disintegrated, Evan felt an ember ignite within. The journey toward healing had only just begun. The cafe buzzed with comforting familiarity, and it provided a momentary shelter from the deluge both inside and outside. As Evan sipped his coffee, heavy with the aroma of roasted beans and sweet caramel, he watched the other patrons. A couple on the far side laughed over shared memories, their fingers brushing playfully. Nearby, a young mother cradled her sleeping baby, the soft coos of a child blending within the ambient sounds of the cafe. The scene stirred something profound within him, a mixture of yearning and despair. He once shared moments like those with Lila, encapsulated in the warmth of their small rituals. They used to visit quaint spots like this, exchanging laughter and deep conversations, building upon layers of connection in steadier times. But the shadows of betrayal loomed large, reframing every memory into a distorted view of what once was. It made him wonder, how could something that warmed their hearts become a weapon capable of inflicting the deepest wounds? Was betrayal inevitable, a litmus test for every deep bond? Or was this merely a question for him, paradox he had to solve? As the rain continued to pelt against the glass, a familiar ache formed in his chest. Each droplet seemed to echo Lila's laughter and the genuine moments that had nurtured their love. What had been so uncomplicated once had morphed into a turbulent sea, and he was left grappling with what felt like dimensions of betrayal. Hand trembling, he stared at the blank napkin where he had jotted those tentative words earlier, the ink shimmering as if alive with possibility. It was an odd comfort he sought, but also a harbinger of vulnerability. Could he really reach out? Did he dare to unearth the emotions that had lain dormant in the rubble of their relationship? Anxiety twisted in his gut, but beneath it, an ember of hope flickered, nudging him toward action. Was it possible that this was not merely a story of loss, but one of rediscovery? Within that tumult, perhaps both he and Lila had lost sight of their authentic selves, swallowed by expectations and the drone of daily routines that dulled their instincts. The more he pondered, the more he understood how much he, too, had concealed the parts of himself that craved adventure and spontaneity, relegated to the background noise while entrapped in a job and obligations. Did they understand each other anymore? With shaking hands, Evan picked up the pen again, a potent need manifesting as he began writing anew. The rain drummed softly against the window, its rhythm both steadying and compelling, as ink flowed to the page like an unaccustomed balm sought by a parched heart. "Dear Lila," he began, and the words cascaded as if unearthing a long-buried truth. "I've thought a lot about us, about everything. I still wrestle with the words you spoke that evening. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't furious or hurt. The truth is, you forever changed my world. I don't know whether I can forget, but I want to understand. I want to know what you think and feel, not through a screen, but face to face." The cafe exuded warmth, and through the window he watched the rain dance outside, as if coaxing the corresponding tremors within him to take flight, to break through the cocoon of struggles he had built around himself. Shifting slightly in his chair, he continued to write, tapping into that part of him he thought he discarded. "I miss you, Lila. I miss the laughter we once shared, the dreams we built. I want to talk not just about the betrayal, but what lies beneath it. I want to find out if we can weave our hearts back together, or at least meet halfway as two people desperate for understanding." He hesitated, eyes scanning the words before returning to the page. Writing about hurt often feels like navigating uncharted waters, and as he poured his heart out, he was acutely aware of the risk involved. What if she never replied? What if her thoughts echoed with a dissonance that overwhelmed any attempt at reconciliation? That uncertainty pulled at him like a tide threatening to overpower. But still, the ink flowed freely, revealing a part of himself that he had locked away deep within, a beacon in murky waters. "I believe we can walk through the storm together. Just give me a sign that you're willing to too." With that, Evan folded the napkin, feeling a mix of dread and exhilaration wash over him. The time for fear had passed. He intended to step into the storm, not shield himself from it. The act of reaching out felt monumental, almost transcendent. It was freeing, unlocking bonds previously strained but now ripe with potential. This was an invitation, not just to Lila, but to himself, to embrace the complications and allow the journey to unfurl as it may. The moment he hit send, he felt a mixture of anxiety and release, like a bird let loose from a cage. The rain outside softened to a gentle patter, the world seeming to mirror his internal transformation as he took a deep breath. Was it possible that each moment spent within turmoil could give life to something new? His heart quickened as a singular thought emerged, one he may have avoided before. Perhaps there existed a new beginning even amid such despair. He stared into his cup, gazing at the ripples left untouched in the surface, as if seeking reflections of a future filled with possibility. Engaging with the uncertainties, embracing the rawness of their shared experiences, felt like the only valid path ahead, the one that would allow him to reclaim the depth of his humanity marred by insecurities and anger. As he left the cafe, ready to step back out into the rain, he felt lightness spreading through him, allowing each step to echo a newfound sense of purpose. In the distance, the city lights shimmered like forgotten promises, beckoning him forward. Emboldened, Evan decided to trust the unfolding journey. He was ready to confront the tempest and see if it led back to her. Through the noise and the heartbreak, perhaps, just perhaps, they could find each other again amidst the chaos, and in that rediscovery, fortified against the trials ahead, heal in ways they hadn't yet imagined. The rain softened, creating a symphony of gentle taps against the pavement as I exited the cafe. The cool air swept over my face, invigorating my senses and mingling with damp earth scent, a reminder that even the heaviest storms could give way to freshness. As I walked, each step pulsed with anticipation and a deep-seated apprehension swirling in my chest. There was no denying it. The message had been sent, and with it, a tremor of hope reverberated through me. The image of Lila haunted me as I moved through the streets, memories flickering like distant streetlights while my heart pounded with both longing and trepidation. Moments from our life together played before me, lazy Sunday mornings wrapped in each other's warmth, spontaneous road trips filled with laughter and music, whispered promises bathed in a glow of candlelight. They all wove a rich tapestry of connection, now shadowed by her betrayal, yet the essence of what we had remained, a fragile thread that connected us still. I pulled my collar up against the chill, seeking refuge against the gusts of wind swirling with raindrops that seemed to echo the tears I refused to shed. It was a cool embrace, a reminder that every ending holds a glimmer of potential. With every step, I wrestled with the urge to reach for my phone, to check for a response that may or may not come, but I put it out of my mind. Zoning out to the rhythm of my footsteps and the patter of rain helped me navigate through the doubts seeking a foothold in my thoughts. As I walked past storefronts, their brightly lit windows displayed shimmering treasures, clothes on mannequins, baked goods that promised sweetness, vibrant vases filled with flowers. Everything felt alive, bustling with potential, and contrasting starkly with the turmoil within. I craved connection, not only with Lila but also with the world, yearning for the spontaneous pulse of life that once filled my days. I'd been so ensnared in grief and anger that I had forgotten joy could accompany heartbreak. It could inspire growth. A sudden thought struck me, perhaps Lila was feeling it too. The glimmer of sorrow layered upon her laughter during that party had hinted at deeper insecurities and unfulfilled desires, her need for excitement that seemed to burn away her affection for me. I remembered the way her eyes had danced, not just in delight but in desperation to unearth something that was lost to both of us. Maybe a conversation could bring forth a timid flame of understanding. We had known each other thoroughly once. What had cemented our bond could also guide us back to a new lexicon of feelings, one where openness replaced the deceit that had marred our connection. My feet took me toward the park, where an expanse of grass spread like a flowing emerald blanket. I'd often wander here with Lila, our shared dreams cascading amid flowers bending in a breeze. The thought of it made my stomach twist, aching for what had been. Yet I knew stepping into the park's embrace would tether me back to that loving world we had cultivated. Perhaps standing amidst nature's beauty could spark newfound perspectives and understanding. As I meandered along the sunlit path, a cluster of wildflowers caught my eye, their vibrant colors defiant against the moody sky, resolute in blossoming despite the weather. I knelt for a closer look, absorbing their tenacity, their refusal to wilt in the face of adversity. They inspired me. They were living proof that resilience often flourished from brokenness. What if Lila and I could mimic their strength? What if, through our pain, we could cultivate something beautiful? Minutes passed as my mind flowed over possibilities, but moments with clarity often brought forth insecurity. What if Lila responded not with remorse but with a shielded heart? What if she had moved on entirely? Each thought was a drop in a bucket already brimming with doubt, as rain began to drizzle more heavily around me. I drew a breath, seeking to anchor myself amidst the uncertainty. Once a conduit for anger and resentment, I was now writing a narrative painted with vulnerability and hope. Just then, my phone buzzed, snapping me from my reverie. Heart racing, I fumbled it out of my pocket, anticipating an email notification. I held my breath, staring at the screen as the name Lila flashed. It was a response. My deepest yearning teetered between exhilaration and fear. A single breath ignited 1,000 thoughts, and my fingers trembled as I opened the message. Evan, I received your note. It read, "The screen a gateway to a universe where pain and hope intertwined." I've been waiting for you to reach out, yet I wasn't sure if I was ready to face the truth of us. I don't know if we can go back to what we were, but I know we need to talk. Please let's meet. I stood there, rain mingling with the warmth of my tears as emotions tumbled freely, flooding me with a rush of feelings I thought washed away. Relief mingled with lingering pain, and clarity pierced through my heart. A path carved by communication emerged where our silence had constructed barriers. In that moment, I made a promise, not just to myself, but to Lila and our past. No matter where this led, I wouldn't shy away from the depths of our wounds. I would embrace the chaos and embark on a journey toward healing. The opportunity was laid before me like the sunshine breaking through heavy clouds, a chance not just for understanding, but potentially for forgiveness, for a future reshaped by our torment and resurgence. Determined, I tapped a quick reply, my fingers moving with newfound resolution. Let's meet. I'm ready. I hit send and looked up, allowing the heavy, dark sky above to remind me that even in life's storms, A drive toward connection could yield the most incredible transformations. That burgeoning hope illuminated my way as I stepped back into the embrace of the rain, leaving the past heavy on my shoulders but with a heart. The sensation of the rain washing over me felt liberating, each droplet an essence of renewal as I walked towards the park's entrance. The excitement roiling in my core was a contrast to the somber clouds looming above. The amalgamation of hope and fear danced through me like a wild symphony. My heart raced as I processed the weight of Lila's response. We would meet, and I couldn't help but wonder how the conversation would unfurl, how we would navigate the uncharted waters of our brokenness. I tried to envision the park, lush with vibrant green and punctuated by splashes of color from blossoming flowers. It had been our sanctuary, a place filled with laughter and whispered promises. The twisting paths bore witness to our happy moments, and now would witness our reckoning, dressed in the tatters of what once was and tempered by the potential of what could be. Time felt like an elastic band, stretching and contracting as I made my way through the park. The familiar sights surrounded me, those memories surfacing unbidden like ghosts, the sun-drenched afternoons spent sprawled under towering trees, and nights where we stargazed, counting constellations like promises. Yet, even these soothing reminiscences were laced with a bittersweet scent of betrayal, reminding me of the chasm that had opened between us. As I settled on a bench beneath the arching branches of an ancient oak, my fingers intertwined, I forced myself to breathe and meditate on the approaching meeting. What would I say? The words felt heavy like stones in my throat. I replayed our last encounter in my mind, Lila laced in bravado and drunken truths. It tortured me to remember how easily she had discarded the love we had shared. Did she even grasp the magnitude of her words, or had the alcohol dulled the sting of reality beyond her grasp? Evan. The sound of her voice pulled me from my thoughts, sharp and clear like the first crack of thunder. I turned, and there she stood, a kaleidoscope of conflicting emotions dancing within her hazel eyes. I had to fight a flurry of reactions, her presence invoking both yearning and trepidation. She looked beautiful, even under the rain that streaked her hair and blurred her mascara. My heart squeezed painfully, a duality of attraction and resentment coursing through me like a double-edged sword, each part eager to strike with fury or longing. Lila approached slowly, her footsteps edged with hesitation. I almost didn't think you'd come, she murmured as she took a seat beside me, shoulders both tense and relaxed, a contradiction mirrored within our relationship. It was never an option, I replied, surprising even myself with the steadiness of my voice. I was resolute. The pull of the past could no longer shackle my growth, nor could it erase the pink scars they had left. I owed it to myself and to her to confront the truth, however painful it may be. Silence enveloped us, heavy but necessary. I let my gaze drift past her toward a small cluster of children splashing in puddles, each laughter a reminder of innocence, of an unblemished existence unmarred by deceit. But we were not children anymore. We were two flawed adults straddling a treacherous line, the remnants of what we cherished overshadowed by the sadness of loss. Evan, Lila's voice faltered, dredging up the unease that dwelled between us. I've thought about what you wrote. I want to explain. Maybe, I interrupted, my heart thudding in my chest. Maybe we should start from the beginning, Lila. I think we owe it to ourselves to peel back the layers, to lay everything out on the table. She met my gaze, something fragile flickering in her eyes. You're right. I don't want to hide anymore, at least not from you. I nodded quietly. The tension between us simmered, hovering delicately around the rawness of our realities. I watched as Lila's fingers fiddled with the sleeve of her raincoat, a nervous habit I had once found endearing. Now, in the aftermath of betrayal, it was a reminder of her fragility, a reflection of a partnership corroded by unspoken truths. After that night, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. I spiraled. Maybe it was easier to try to forget than to face the mess I'd made. I didn't want to confront what I had done. Seeing you hurt was unbearable. I thought that if I could just move on, then maybe you would too. Her admission struck me, a rush of sympathy unfurling from within. I had remained stewed in my pain, unwilling to extend my heart to encompass hers. She was in the throes of her despair, struggling in the murky depths of the consequences we both shared. You thought dishonesty was the way out? I asked, feeling the tremors of doubt claw at me as I remembered the hurt, the dismissive words that had paralyzed our love. I know it was stupid, she breathed, her frustration bubbling over. But it felt like I was drowning in the mundane. I just wanted, no needed, excitement. I never wanted to hurt you, Evan. I drove myself to distraction when all I should have done was talk to you. As her voice caught in her throat, something within me softened as I saw a desperate yearning in her eyes, the same yearning I'd glimpsed in my moments of sorrow. Was it courage or foolishness to hope for reconciliation between us? For the life that had once been our shared reality, now bound by both artifice and raw vulnerability, still flickered just behind grief. Life isn't just about excitement. I began carefully, my heart racing as I searched for the right words. It's built on foundations, trust, openness, understanding. Those foundations take years to craft. The easy moments you chased were transcendent, fleeting. They don't last, Lila. But what we had, our memories, they were rich and layered, threads that wove us together. My voice remained steady despite the precariousness of our conversation. It was a gamble, opening up while inching toward a precipice of something greater, something uncertain. I recognized all of this, our past, our mistakes. But to unlock the door to healing, we needed to stand steadfast amidst our damages. Silence wrapped around us again as Lila processed my words. The rain continued to pour, yet the world around us seemed to slow, each droplet a countdown to revelation. Could we step beyond the chasms we had built? Was healing merely a stone's throw away, resting in the shadows ready to be unearthed? One step at a time, I reminded myself. The choice was ours together. The way forward began with a desire to truly understand. As I looked at her, hope began to unfurl anew, tentative yet resilient. Lila and I had suffered loss, and for better or worse, we were woven into each other's narratives. Perhaps we could write a new chapter, one marked not by the shadows that dwelled in the past, but rather by the light forged in honesty, speaking truth towards love, building resilience from the simplest bonds shared. Together, we would unbind the chains of misunderstanding, allowing our hearts to confront the complicated landscape of redemption. The rain continued falling, and as I sat next to Lila, I could feel the tension in the air, thick and palpable, as if the storm above us was mirroring the tempest glaring in our hearts. Every droplet that marked our conversation shattered against the ground, a rhythm that felt like our own beating hearts caught somewhere between longing and hurt. I sensed her gaze lingering on me, studying my expression as one might study the sky before a thunderous storm. She was searching for answers, perhaps even for some semblance of reassurance. "I know I let everything spiral out of control," she murmured, her fingers now entwined with one another in a way that spoke of her ethical turmoil. "And I understand why you ran away. You needed space. But now I don't just want to apologize. I want to understand. And I want you to understand me." The way she said understand was almost desperate, like a lifeboat tossed to a drowning soul. My mind flooded with a mix of empathy and pain. In the very same breath she used to confess her betrayal, I could feel the underlying resonance of vulnerability. She was raw, not just as Lila, but as a woman who had lost sight of herself. But could I afford to peel back the layers of that rawness even further, allowing it to mingle with my own wounds? Or would it be a reckless endeavor? "I saw shadows around you, Lila, long before the affair." The admission slipped from my lips unbidden, a truth I had avoided acknowledging until this moment. "You were chasing something that felt beyond our reach. Each time you disappear into late-night plans or social escapes, I felt like an outsider in my own life, a treasure locked away behind mundane duties while the gold was hidden in every frivolity surrounding me." Lila's eyes flickered, the hidden depths of her soul revealing a glimmer of recognition. "God, I thought you saw it as me trying to find my spark. I saw it as myself rediscovering what it felt like to be alive." Her voice trembled, each word splintering against the backdrop of rain. But being alive shouldn't come at a cost to our love. There was something raw about her honesty, something that resonated with my desire to understand her perspective. But still, I felt the remnants of that betrayal clawing at me. "Lila, I loved your spirit, the adventurous, spontaneous side of you. But love isn't a fleeting moment. It's not about those temporary highs. It's about being anchored to one another even as the storms of life beat against you." Her remnant laughter, once a euphoric melody in my life, echoed hollow now, not from joy, but from confrontation. And I forgot that. It was like I was trying to dance on the edge of a cliff, blissfully ignorant of the plunge below. But when I kissed him, God, it shook me. It broke something in me, too. I shifted, my heart aching for her admission. My tongue felt forked and ripped, making it hard to navigate emotions that danced dangerously close to the brink of compassion. "How could you, Lila? Just for a spark? I found myself drawn into a maelstrom of uncertainty, desperate to grasp every nuance, every gossamer thread entwined in our shared history. I didn't think about the consequences until they hit me like a freight train, she confessed, tears glistening on her cheeks in the grayness of the storm. I tried to bury my guilt, Evan. I had to face the music, eventually, and I kept asking myself why I couldn't just talk to you. But I thought you'd leave. I was so far gone in my mind that I'd convinced myself of that. We both fell silent. The rain cascaded around us as if the world was pressing pause, allowing us this fragile moment to bare our souls. Looking out, rays of light began breaking through the clouds, casting gentle illumination across the park, and with each fleeting speck of brightness, I sensed the possibility of something shifting within us. Could we still be better? The question lingered heavily between us. It was not just a question of reconciliation, but a possibility. We were playing with fragmented pieces, a jigsaw missing its edges. Can your honesty and my hurt weave together something else, something stronger? I want to try, Evan. I truly do, she breathed out, her voice stripped of bravado, revealing the depth of her vulnerability. I see the wreckage that I caused, and I know it will take time. But if you hold this space for me, if we can work through it together, I want to learn how to build again. I studied her earnest expression, the anguish in her features layered with a fragile hope. It felt as if we were standing at a precipice, where everything hinged on the next words to break the silence. I wanted to believe that we could orchestrate a redemption. Yet each note to be plucked reminded me of a symphony long forgotten, appearing distant yet achingly familiar. Okay, I replied finally, emotionally exhausted yet exhilarated. I will hold this space, but we need to be honest with ourselves from here on out. Every emotion, every uncertainty, it all matters. I won't fall into a pattern of silence. I won't drown in your pain, nor allow our love to become our prison. Her expression softened, a tentative smile forming as her eyes glimmered. I promise. We need to help each other navigate this step by step. Whatever this leads to, whether it's healing or the realization of our own separate paths, we promise to be honest. We shared the weight in that moment, a blend of old wounds and new desires. The rain continued to fall softly, but just beyond, sunlight filtered through the clouds, warming our faces, an omen of hope rising from chaos. We were still bound by our shared thread, but now it felt less like a noose and more like a lifeline. Together, we were emerging, both refreshed and raw, ready to face a future uncertain but glimmering suggestively, carved out of empathy, built upon courage. The conversation, while still hung heavy with the complexities of our shared past, began to shift towards the monumental unknown, yet also shimmering with glimmers of newfound possibility. We could reshape the narrative. We would navigate this together, no longer just spectators of our fractured love, but co-authors of the redemption we longed to see.